Hello Sarah Beadle, hello Louise. I think I said hello Louise already. So we've got a few people coming on, Steph, so we better put a show on.
Oh, we can do that.
Okay, so click like if you're here. Oh my God, someone wants to join us. Mandy McGlynn, you don't have to come and join us. Hello Kerry Flinton.
Hi, Kerry.
So let's start talking, Steph.
Yeah.
So tell Steph,
That's me.
tell people who you are and why we're chatting.
Okay, so I know a few of you know me. Kerry is one of my lovely customers, so I've known for a long time, actually longer than I've been saddle fitting for her. I am a specialist saddle fitter, so by background, I've been fitting wide horses as a speciality for 13 years, and that brings its own set of challenges. And I've been looking for a second brand for 9 years, unbelievably. And because I've already been a specialist and I've been very holistic, I've wanted to work in the right way with the riders, but mostly with the horses, to be honest. And I don't know whether to look at David or look at the camera now.
Talk to me, because I'm here because I'm genuinely interested.
You're looking lost.
Because I'm very naive with this, but look at this from a biomechanics point of view and find this absolutely fascinating since I've spoke with yourself about saddle fitting full stop. So I interrupted you because you weren't sure where to look, but look at me,
I'll look at you or look at the camera or, wave at people.
And I'm just going to say, if you have any questions, ping them in. We won't necessarily answer them straight away, but we will try and go through a few questions at the end of this. So
and
continue onwards, Steph.
If there are others that we can't get to tonight because it's midnight or something, then we'll answer them in the group. But yeah, so 9 years I was looking for another brand.
Yeah.
And it had to be special.
Okay.
And the brand that I'm fitting is not just a saddle brand, as you've gathered.
Yeah.
It brings its own whole approach, looking at rider fit, and it is scientific, and I know that's why it appealed to you because it's
why it fascinated
me. So I actually contacted David. Would it have been October probably?
Yeah, October.
Anyway. And I said, I'd really like to see what you're doing. Can I come along and watch a clinic? And what I didn't know was that's not really how it works.
No.
So eventually he just slotted me in, and it was going to be a half-hour appointment, I think, for an assessment.
It wasn't half an hour, it was about an hour.
But he then said...
And I didn't finish the assessment.
He said, I've looked you up, and you were quite interesting, so I've booked you an hour. And yeah, I think we did about 5 minutes of assessment exercises at the end, maybe a bit more, but we just didn't stop talking about saddles. So David had already been talking to another saddle fitter who I've now networked with, which is great, who had done some of the training, in fact probably a bit more of the training in some ways on the theory than I've done. She'd gone to Sweden to this brand and done that training, but wasn't outfitting them, and so didn't have that to bring to the table. So it made sense because it slotted in with some of what she had said to you.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Sam, hello Sam if you're watching.
Sam Jameson, ex-saddle fitter.
But everything you two said, and then since we spoke, makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not going to claim that I know much about saddles or even that much about horse riding, but I'm learning more and more every day. What fascinates me, and I think we should come on to this quite quickly, is what you do for the rider to start with. That is maybe different, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
What do you do for a rider? So let's go into the philosophy a little bit for me.
So we'll talk about Ergo, and it's Ergo X2 is the brand, ergox2.com, and I'm the first fitter in the UK. I might even be the first overseas, no, I'm probably not the first overseas fitter, but anyway, we've got one in Canada now, so it's getting quite exciting. But how this was started was that the lady in Sweden who started the brand was fitting a lot for Amerigo, who have huge variations for the rider. Right. It's a big brand, quite expensive saddles, beautiful saddles, and so she had quite a lot of options, but what she didn't have was a system, and she didn't have all the answers. Okay. And I know she got a bit limited with what she could do with the brand, so she decided to strike out on her own, and everything was based around research. So she's worked with a lady called Lena Gunnarsson, who's a physio over there, and they've started from the ground up working out how they can possibly do the best for the rider. Yep. So I'm going to now go way over your head and talk horsey stuff for a second.
But how can you say that? If someone could just type in a comment and explain what she's saying, I'll be happy.
Yeah, we'll have a translator, please. So this was about how do we best align ourselves on the horse, and we want to ideally get close to the centre of gravity, the centre of rotation of the horse, which is all going to make sense to you, it's just not as a trainer. And how do we get the rider to be as effective as possible? And this isn't really about the sort of work that David does, but it meshes with it. So
definitely.
We're not giving riders conditioning programs like David does, which is why, what we do sort of jigsaws together. But it was about how can we give you a neutral place to sit in the saddle, where you are supported with a neutral pelvis as your baseline. So we're not saying you should be in a neutral pelvis all the time because you're going to move with the horse, but to return to a resting position that's fully supported where you are not having to make effort to be there. Whenever you are making effort in the saddle to be in the right position, you are probably fighting gravity. And how many riders have we got behind the vertical with, their six-pack engaged? Because they're here. Whereas if we can align them over their pelvis, then they're doing much less work, they're not in tension. And essentially, how we view the horse is that rotation in the ribcage is one of the biggest issues. And I've done a blog post on this recently. If you go back on my Facebook page, you'll see a blog post with a coloured horse that's on my website. The blog is on my website. And we see that horses tend to be rotated to the right in the ribcage, and many riders show a similar pattern that either help trigger that in the horse, but actually over 90% of horses have it. So it's likely, congenital, intrinsic, whatever. But the riders are then falling into the kind of trap that the horse leaves for them, and they get into this vicious cycle. So if we can sit the rider better with less effort, less tension, everything becomes harmonious. So that's where this came from, and they've looked at their own method of simplifying some adjustments, of assessing the rider off the horse, coming up with a real scientific analysis of pelvic shape, hip conformation, but you have to surmise that a little bit. It's interpretation on the hips, and looking at some basic asymmetry tests and strength weakness tests.
And that's where we started to really link, isn't it? Because I can just take that further for you.
Yes. So we can do some basics, then we can send people to David who can do a more thorough assessment, come up with exercises. VBR, vertical balance riding, is the system, and they have little things like they'll have people, clean their teeth on one leg. So they're getting their version of improving proprioception, improving strength, and so on. But I know in the UK we've got such amazing, what you do, and we've got a lot of good biomechanics trainers who do the ridden training. So I think we'll be networking maybe a little bit more than they do in Sweden, where the saddle fitters kind of do the whole thing. But I can make adjustments to riders on the saddle, getting them aligned better, getting them to feel the horse pushing up. We're essentially trying to get you in the right place to influence the horse to push up in front. So you get the lightness of the hooves in front, you get the horse working correctly biomechanically, lifting through the thoracic sling, and then they're carrying you efficiently. They are not designed to carry us. So we have to do everything we can to help them.
So talk me through the process you take a rider through.
Okay.
Because you've explained this to me a couple of times, but tell people who know what you're talking about.
And I've done a basic assessment with you as well. And I was going to have a laugh. I now have a double XL.
Okay.
So, we can always put you on one of these at some point. So we start with a saddle stand. And it is fairly specific.
I'm just seeing how many of you are watching. Please pop comments in if you want to.
Yeah, we will be checking that you've listened to everything.
There'll be a test at the end.
So essentially, and I'll sit on here, we will have a look. Well, we'll first of all get as many details from the rider before booking in as possible, which I think is really important, and I don't think that many saddle fitters get lots of information. So I'm really keen on finding out your injuries, any known weaknesses, any asymmetries that you already know you've got, because that's really important. So that gives me context as to how much a rider knows about themselves. So you'll come along, I will then double check what injuries you've got. We're going to check all of that before we start doing things with you. And I will look at the rider standing. I'm going to look at everything from feet all the way up, and look at how that central biomechanics jacket is lining up, and see, rotation is one of the commonest things that I'm looking for, because, like we say, it matches with the rotation of the horse. Then I'll sit you on here. And we basically start an assessment, and I know there's at least a couple of you on there who've had this assessment. So yeah, we sit you on here, and I'm going to look at how you sit naturally. This is a little bit narrower than most horses, not all. So I am bearing that in mind, and I'm using padding to get you comfortable. And we use, not everybody needs it though. Somebody with a very narrow pelvis is actually going to find this comfortable. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think you did. I can't
No, I
quite
didn't,
remember. No.
Not at all. I did not find that comfortable at all, just like that.
To me, it's like sitting on a piece of 2x4
Yeah.
because I have a wide pelvis. So the company in Sweden have looked at, I think, 3,500 riders, probably more now. So they have taken pelvic measurements from every single rider. So the process is building towards getting your pelvic imprint and getting this idea of what your hips do. But the first thing we need to do is get you comfortable on here, so that's padding, and then get you stable and supported. And the biggest idea is that most saddles rely on you being sort of at a basic level of comfort sitting on the saddle. Is the twist about right? Is there about enough space in the saddle for you? Are your seat bones hanging off or are they not? And we're taking it to a whole different level on that. We're adding padding, we're looking at your stability. So I'm moving the rider forwards and backwards to see where their pubic arch might be, to see how much support they need. But the biggest thing we're trying to do with this forward balance idea, which is what a lot of the French and Italian brands do, but in order to get you forwards, we are of course unweighting the seat bones slightly. If we can allow you to sit properly on your pubic arch, and I used to think Sylvia Locke is a classical trainer who talks about the 3-point seat. It's possibly her phrase, but she uses it a lot. And I used to just think, how do you sit in a 3-point seat? I can't do that. And I've been riding since I was 9. So we are trying to allow you to sit on your pubic arch and have the saddle, the twist, be the right width and the right height to make you comfortable. But further to that, we're trying to get weight down your inner thigh. If we can transfer weight from seat bones back here to little bit onto your pubic arch and more down your thighs, we're relieving the thoracolumbar in the horse, so the back half of the saddle and behind the saddle. We're allowing them to move more freely there, which is where they need to be able to move. And we're getting you, like I was saying, above the centre of gravity, centre of movement.
This all makes a lot of sense to me. And the reason we've spoken a lot is some of this is done in cycling nowadays. And putting people in a good structurally supported position in cycling has almost revolutionised it. So that's one of the conversations we had where I just went, I get exactly what you're doing because we put you in the right place structurally for your pelvis. Any asymmetries won't play out as bad at the moment. And if you start to correct those asymmetries, and I find this fascinating, please bang any questions in you've got, because to me, this is like a no-brainer. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm coming into the equestrian world and saying, oh, why are you not doing this way? But to measure someone's pelvis when you're sitting on something surely has to be really, really... I mean, how important is it?
With this brand, it's absolutely critical. Then we have to look at how it might work in the industry, and because I fit another brand, I'm considering, certainly recommending that every rider has this assessment, even if they're a shoe-in for my other brand, which is AH Saddles, because I do think it's really useful. And I ought to say, I guess, how we actually get the pelvic measurement. So once we've got you sitting fairly well supported with roughly the right amount of padding, and we've tested your stability, then it's and one or two might have seen my post about this, but I don't know whether you can see that.
Thank you, Sarah Howe, for the comment. The light bulbs I thought might be popping in you.
Corrugated paper, and we just sit that on the top, and it will go on top of whatever padding is appropriate for you. We will then get, your seat bones will mark at the back, your pubic arch will mark here. And we do have an average, which is 9 to 10 centimetres between seat bones, and in a T shape, it's 9 to 10 centimetres forwards to the pubic arch as well. So that's your average. And once we've got that, it'll be really useful. Oh, we've just lost our light.
We've lost our light.
I'm glad it's not broken. Very noisy, but not broken. So
it's now got a little bit dimly lit in here.
It's looking moody.
We've got mood lighting.
We've got shadow as well. Anyway, where was I? Pelvic shape. So yes, you can take it to somebody like David because he's going to feed that into his assessment. He's going to look at it and see. And you don't just see the downward force, because we also do the exercises looking at symmetry.
Yeah.
I'm getting you to move your legs to lift each leg. I'm getting you rocking backwards and forwards. So there are forces being applied to it as well. So we can interpret a little bit of shear force and rotation.
Yeah.
Like if you see a much bigger print on one side from a seat bone, it may be that side of the pelvis is less stable.
Yeah.
So as that leg's being lifted, you're going to get a bigger print. Now, I'm not fully expert in this yet. There's so much to learn.
Yeah.
So give it another year, and I would like to class myself as an expert.
One of the questions I have is, that I want to throw in some of the questions people have already answered.
Yeah.
Is, once you've got all that information,
Yeah.
what does that mean for the design of the saddle?
Okay, so the designs from Ergo are actually reasonably standardised.
Yeah.
So they've worked out that seat length plays a really massive part.
Yeah.
So the wider you are, the more likely you are to have a small seat size, because it's effectively wider.
Yeah.
So we take that into account. But ultimately, seat size relates to the measurement from front to back of the pelvis.
Okay.
So I measure 7.5 centimetres, which is clearly below average.
Yeah.
So I'm somewhere 16.5, maybe 17, but would be 16.5. And I'm, forgive me, I'm 5'8" and a size 14. So not your classic 16.5-inch seat. The seat is very, very carefully webbed and strained on a wooden tree. So it is designed to have the perfect curve from front to back to support the pelvis. And I will dig a saddle out at this point. And I think we've probably got more dressage riders watching than jump, I would guess.
You never know.
I've got a jump saddle here, but I want to show you the shape of the basic seat, which is in many of the saddles, because it's shallow. We are not looking at locking you in with high cantle, high pommel, because that is going to induce tension.
Yeah.
It could put you into an anterior eye forwards or posterior backwards pelvic tilt.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be flat and open, which also, of course, if you're doing lateral work, you need to be able to move a little bit.
Yeah.
And if you're in a deep seat, you can't. So they are fairly flat seated, but they've been webbed and strained very, very carefully. And I have had maybe one person go, oh no, that's not comfortable. And one person not quite sure until I tweaked it a bit, but everybody else has sat in it and gone, it's pretty much the most comfortable saddle I've ever sat in.
Okay.
They are, I will say, they're also made to complete templates. So there's a template that is run across from side to side and from front to back to check that the seat is millimetre perfect, which you will not find in most saddle brands.
Okay. So talk me through other benefits of this.
So if we can get your more contact down through your thighs, you are just full stop better supported.
Okay.
So with the chain, if your horse changes his balance, you're just there.
And why do you get more contact through the inner thighs?
Why?
I'm going to start quizzing you
How?
now, or how? Yes.
How? So when we get you on the stand and we look at where we're having to pad to get stability, and stability is tested by getting the rider to raise their arms, which creates a lever, and then drum. And everybody feels like a right tit doing it, but it works.
Okay.
And then
but that makes a lot of sense to me. It's another reason this makes a lot of sense to me. You're using a proprioceptive test, which tests the cerebellum. So just bringing that bit into it.
Yeah. And we partly watch, we partly quiz the rider. We may feel your back, and some of this is quite hands-on.
Yeah.
So in Sweden they're very touchy-feely, and I'm working on that because not all riders want to be touchy-feely, but it does help. I may feel their back when I do that and see if they're engaging and holding themselves up, which means they've not got support from their inner thigh. So what we now have to take into account is the shape of the horse, because that
is one question that's come up. Can these be fitted to any type of horse is one of the questions.
Many shapes of horses.
Okay.
Not every single one, and this is not the only tree, but this is the main tree.
Yeah.
So I've come from an environment where we had 4 trees just for wide horses, and a very detailed fit. We had 2 different panel styles, umpteen options, and everything's about getting the right fit for the horse, flocking it to within an inch of its life for stability, blah, blah, blah. This is the other end of the telescope. And to begin with, when I heard there was one main tree, I'm sure a lot of people watching can understand why I was a bit like, But this treat works on the vast majority of horses, and it's because we've simplified the fit.
Okay.
So we're fitting mainly through the middle of the saddle. Because you're in forward balance, your weight is always over that part of the saddle.
Yeah.
In English saddles where your weight goes slightly more to the back, and you will see that there's about an inch difference often in where you sit on the horse, you've got weight going forwards and backwards all the time. And in these we try and avoid that, and it means the fit for the horse is more simple, and we're allowing them to move through here rather than obsessing about every detail.
Yeah.
And it works.
Okay.
And I was a bit cynical, but how I came to it was through the lady that invented it, Maria Halring, seeing her posts. So I knew her, I didn't know her mind, but I'd seen her postings, and so I was prepared to suspend disbelief for a bit.
Okay.
But essentially, to get weight down the inner thighs depends on what the shape of the horse is.
Yeah.
How wide your pubic arch is plays a small part, but how your hips hang plays a bigger part. And if I end up, I was re-watching a video of one of my customers today where we fitted her, and we actually ended up with rolled yoga mats, because we use yoga mats for the padding. Rolled yoga mats down under her knees, and that made the difference.
Yeah.
That having her knees supported stopped her falling forwards, and suddenly she was completely comfortable.
Yeah.
So to get weight down the thigh, if you've got a rib cage like that, we might end up putting quite a lot of padding under the skirt, which I know of one or two other saddle fitters that do that, but I've never been taught the reason why and when to use it.
Okay.
And then we look at how much padding is on the flap. So you might go from a mono flap, which would be the thinnest flap, and again you won't hear saddles talked about like this. People want a mono flap because it looks cool, or they think they like the feel of it because they can feel the horse, but it's got to be appropriate. So this is a thick flap with calfskin padding, and for somebody that has got maybe narrow hips, so forget pelvis, this is hips, they might want something that it sits a little bit closer to the horse, particularly if they want a wider horse. So this is a double flap, so not quite as thin as mono flap, but it has a window here of thinner leather, which allows the inner thigh to come against the horse. This doesn't suit me. I've got wide seat bones, fairly wide hips, and a wide pubic arch, so this is too narrow for me.
I think just jumping in, what makes so much sense to me is the fact that you're talking about size of pelvis, size of hips, how the person sits, and it just makes so much sense that you're just taking into account the rider biomechanics and the structural biomechanics. You know, before you've even moved, this is why I love what you do, because if you put someone in a good structural position, they'll move better from that position. If someone's structure has not been taken into account in any sport, let alone riding where there's two brains,
absolutely,
you will react in a very different way than if you're supported.
Yeah.
I love this just purely because it makes sense to me as an outsider, I suppose.
Yeah.
That why would you not be measuring all these structures and looking at hips and looking at pelvises of the rider? Okay, the horse welfare is paramount, but
always.
This is still part of that.
This is all about enabling your horse to be the best horse that they can be, and for you to not have postural issues, not have straightness issues, for you to be able to keep that rib cage up under you. It tends to be dropped on the right. So how many people are going around corners like this, you know, and are trying to, I mean, I've seen younger riders especially, trying to do this to get their horse out to the track because they're falling in on the left rein. And suddenly, if everything's straight and supported and you can engage what you need to engage, then everything becomes so much easier.
I'm going to grab some of the questions because I can see people have obviously stayed watching because we've got a few questions here. So
go for it.
Let's put you on the spot. I'll Jill Day with a nice long question.
Yeah.
So it might take me a while to read this because remember I'm just a lifeguard of A-levels. How much do you take the conformation of the horse into account? As a coach, I see lots of horses are higher in front and slope off behind, so the saddle does not fit straight. Riders then slide back of the saddle and have to collapse in the waist to counteract what the saddle is going. Does that make sense?
That's critical for saddle fitting, full stop.
Yeah.
Absolutely critical. If the saddle isn't in balance on the horse, then you're not going to be sitting in the right place. So it's a really good question, but not specific to the brand. And I would say that Something that isn't talked about enough is, depending on the level of work you're doing, your horse will be in a different balance, in a different pace. So we've been talking about this on a saddle fitting group recently, which is that if you're on a more advanced dressage horse, as you go off into trot, the front of your horse may, or perhaps even should, come up, and your balance is going to tip back. So we have to have a discussion, not only that we fit the saddle to enable the horse to push up so their balance doesn't vary as much, because I fit a lot of cobs and natives, have done for 13 years, and not many of them truly push up. If we can facilitate you to push up, do prehab for the horse, which will be some groundwork to start the horse straightening and pushing up, then we start to get a more consistent balance, because otherwise you've got the difficult decision as to which pace do you balance the saddle in. Now, for most of my riders on the cobs and natives, it's in trot, because trot is that intrinsically unbalanced pace, where the rider tends to need most support. I hope that answers it. I mean, they have to be balanced. We do have another panel. We do have 2 other trees as well, but this is the main, this is going to fit. And I don't know the stats. I only started with the brand in the summer, so you're gathering this is still a learning curve for me, and it's still a learning curve for the guys that invented the saddles, because it's all new ground and they're learning all the time. But yeah, this was probably 9 out of 10 horses, give or take.
Okay.
But something with a higher wither, but it's a longer wither. That's the crucial thing. If we have a longer wither, we go to a different tree.
Hope that makes sense, Jill. Hope that answers your question. Penny, are these measurements skeletal measurements, or can muscle ligament tightness affect the measurement?
Oh, the muscles and ligaments, I'm quite sure, will affect the measurement. And if we're seeing serious asymmetry, then we're certainly referring to a body worker straight away.
Yeah.
If we're having to maybe shim under one seat bone, which isn't something I've done yet, I'll confess, but we can work asymmetrically on the stand.
With the pelvic measurement, that would be a skeletal measurement, won't it?
Yeah, so what I was
that's
going to say is it's seat bones.
Yeah.
And it is pubic arch, but yeah, you might have been pulled slightly by your tendons and muscles and the pattern.
So it's a really good question, no surprise, Penny.
But it is the bony bits.
Yeah, so you are measuring the bony bits, so it's a skeletal measurement. Should come on camera, really. But you will have an effect. If someone is really asymmetrical, it'll be interesting. The more we do together, the more we'll learn this.
Yeah.
But the skeletal measurement for me that's your structure.
Yep.
That's where your bony bits are. They're not going to change that dramatically.
And we can even get, and my knowledge of anatomy will not be quite as good as yours, but there's the bit on the inside of the trochanter that points in, and so some people's imprints can have that showing.
And if someone's hips are more internally rotated, you'll get different things showing up, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that's why I love talking to you and someone like Sam, because all of that must have to be taken into account. Yeah,
and yet it's trial and error, and we can talk about the industry and where it might go. We'll maybe get onto that.
So let me just read this question.
Should I come up and read it?
I tell you what, I'm getting glasses on Wednesday morning, and I'm actually realising how much I need them at the moment. It sounds as though each saddle is bespoke for the rider and also the horse. So I assume we would need a different saddle for each horse that we ride. That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. If I explain how I'm working, I've got my first fitting for a trainer that has multiple horses, which is Dan Wayne Equestrian, which one or two of you will know I work with him. And Dan needs actually quite a wide setup. So everybody thinks that this is something I have to get onto. Yep. Male and female pelvises, there just isn't such a thing. And there is research now to prove that even some of the archaeological work was maybe not right. It wasn't quite as dimorphic is the correct term, that there's male and female. So any saddles marketed to that, trust me, our evidence shows that there really is no male-female saddle. Remind me of the question? So I knew I'd do that for a
So Sarah's question was, because I can't go up there and read it again, was, do you need a different saddle for each horse?
So what we're doing is we are going for not the absolute widest support for Dan. We are going for a bit less support. But the further customization on these saddles is not just which model you order, but then where you put additional padding.
Yeah.
So it's a very simple technique, but we're looking to fill the gaps. So a horse is round and a rider's legs are two straight lines with all the troubling articulation at the top and whatever challenges that's giving us. So we're never going to have a flow, a complete flow to the leg. So we want to get all the basics right, but then we may still have gaps and we will pad those out.
Yeah.
So what I tend to do is go a little bit narrower, but looking at the range of horses they might ride. So somebody on an eventer might have mainly narrow ribcage horses. So we would fit according to that type.
Yeah.
And then I can pad. So we go a bit narrower because we can always pad. We can't take anything off a saddle to make it narrower.
Okay.
But once you've got the right seat for you, then you're going to still find it much easier to ride each horse, even if the flap isn't quite right. But the aim is always to have exactly the right flap.
Okay, I think that answers that.
But the padding comes off Velcro basically, so you can put it on for some horses and take it off for others, and it's.
I was just about to ask you that, but you've answered that perfectly. So hopefully that's answered Sarah. Who else have we got who's asked a question? So Louise, some saddle makers. Sorry, I'm really close here because I really need my glasses. Some saddle makers make 20 and 22 inch saddles. Do you think this is good as it provides more support to rider, or bad as more of a struggle for horses?
So 20 to 21 inch saddles.
20 and 22 inch saddles. It's an interesting question, which I have no idea what you're talking about. If I do, I'm joking.
I would completely disagree with needing those saddles.
Okay.
Even when I was fitting just AH saddles, I had one or two fittings where I realised that if I fitted to hip shape, which is the only reason you'd fit a 21 to 22 inch saddle, because I don't believe that rider height and rider leg length should be a big determinant on seat size.
Right.
It makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
You accommodate the flap, you sit the pelvis where it needs to be, you make the flap to suit. Sometimes it won't work, so you go bigger. But the only reason for doing a 20 to 21 inch seat is going to be for a big bottomed rider.
Yeah.
And that soft tissue, cutaneous tissue, upholstery, it moves.
Yep.
And you need to support the bones. So,
and I think this comes back to one of the first conversations we had about, and I remember this actually, because you cannot look at a person and decide they've got a big pelvis.
No.
They might have a lot of, I like the fact, subcutaneous tissue. They might have a lot of fat in their bottom.
Yeah.
Or they might just have a large muscular bottom. We're now talking about bums.
And I fitted for powerlifters,
exactly.
for saddles. So,
But you still can't say that person has got a wide pelvis.
No idea.
No one knows, because someone can have a very small pelvis.
The only clue sometimes is where hips come out here.
Yeah.
And that's about the only visual clue
that
I think you get from the outside.
Yeah. That's an interesting question for me to listen to the answer to, actually, because this is what fascinates me. This is one of three parts that make up the riding experience. And what you're doing absolutely fascinates me, because I'm trying to look at riders and go, are you asymmetrical? Are you switching on muscles? Where's tight? Where's not tight? What needs firing up? But if you start in a better structurally supported place, those will not impact you as much as they would do if you're really, I talked with a client yesterday about, she's always slipping in the saddle, and I was sort of going, can I say go and see Steph or not? But I probably did. But that person, any asymmetries are really going to come out, because she just knew her saddle doesn't feel right at the moment.
Can I just touch back on seat size? Because I don't know of a single horse that can take a saddle that size anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, you can fit beyond the back rib, arguably. I tend not to. I can't, I really don't fit beyond the back rib. There are ways and means that you can potentially do it. But you fit for somebody of that size, then what horse are they riding? Are we getting into welfare issues?
Yeah.
That has to be talked about. And then in this brand, if I tell you that I'm fitting mostly 16 halves, which is going to blow your mind, because I know most of you will get out your local saddle fitter and they'll bring 17 halves for most adults. They might have a 17. I've fitted one 17
Yeah.
Now, I've only done a handful of fittings because they're all to order, so, you know, it's building up slowly, but they're all 16.5s.
Okay. Couple more questions. How much does the girth influence the saddle?
Oh, that's a bit of a general question, and very hard to answer. So you
can choose whether you want to answer.
Yeah, I mean, you've got so many aspects to girthing. Yeah. I think there are probably other people better placed to talk about that at length. On these saddles, I can show you the options on these saddles. We have movable girthing, so I don't know whether you can see that, but I've got 2 lots of webbing at the front here, and I can attach the front girth strap to one or the other or both. We've got a sliding V at the back. On the AH saddles, we have 4 girth straps on both sides. So the choice of girth straps is really important for balancing and stabilising the saddle. Choice of girth, I have a few pet girths that I recommend, mainly long girths. I think dressage girths are a complete nut and minefield. And I would direct you to, there's a WOW video on YouTube looking at pressure from girths. Now, is pressure the be all and end all for girths? I don't think it is, but it's a really interesting video. And don't believe the hype about particular girths. The first of the expensive anatomical girths that came out does not suit every horse by any means. I'd also say, do not take any blanket rules that you should never have elastic or should always have elastic. The way I fit even the widest horses, strong elastic both ends is my preference, but the Steuben cord girth works brilliantly, which isn't elasticated. But again, there is this stuff out there, a bit like these, you've got to have a female-friendly saddle and that means a narrow twist. Well, there are also other things like never have elastic on your girth and never ever use elastic on a wide horse. And I can blow all of that completely out of the water with 70 years collective experience fitting wide horses. Hopefully that will help on girthing.
Okay, it's just a comment there. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you so much for joining. For those of you who are still on and watching, and if you watch this on record, just click love button, like button, whatever it is, just tell us, has this been interesting? For me, it's fascinating. Like, I learn every minute of every day at the moment because I want to be the best equestrian strength and conditioning coach I can be. I was going to say there is. Maybe I did want to say there is. There's lots of love buttons and lots of likes, which is good.
Thank you very much.
Please drop a comment below. If you want to get in touch with Steph, message her on Facebook.
Yep.
If you want to put your email address in quickly, you can do.
I'm also going to say be really careful because unfortunately I lost all access to my Facebook in November permanently. So I have a new profile and a new page. And if I direct you to the page, first of all, it's Steph Bloom Specialist Saddle Fitter. And you'll get new content on there. There's lots of good content on my old stuff, but you'll get lost. Don't message me on there because I can't see them.
And if you struggle to get in contact with Steph, contact me and I'll act as her PA, and then we'll get you in
can
contact.
Google me, I've got a website. And
one thing I'm going to say to finish, we are going to do a clinic together at some point.
At least one.
At least one. More than one, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think
and we are going to do a clinic together at some point, and we'll put some details up about that because I think it's fascinating for Steph to go through the process she goes through. And then for me to add anything I can. Maybe I'll add nothing, but I think what we've spoken about so far is you're doing you're really getting a viewpoint of the rider to add to everything that you're doing with saddle fitting. And I think it's absolutely amazing. And then when I look at it, you know, if you've got someone in a structural position and I can help you with exercises that mean once you're moving, asymmetry doesn't come back in, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I've always seen what I do as this part of a team.
Yeah.
And we can't all operate alone. And I think the more we learn about riders, the more I've put a post up this evening. If you find my page, I've posted it relates to bikes.
Yeah.
And if you look at any other top level sport, where on earth would people be saying we have to work harder, we have to go on the lunge, or you have to bleed, or it'll come, or or keep doing this for 4 weeks on the saddle. And in every other sport, people invest in having exactly the right kit that's customised to them. If you learn from the Sky cycling team, I mean, every tiny thing mattered. And yet we're forcing people to ride in saddles that either we absolutely know don't fit, or we are using trial and error to try and find the very best fit, or we're going off marketing spiel that, oh, well, this is brilliant for this, therefore. And most marketing spiel is just spiel. This brand doesn't advertise. They grow slowly. They work with people like me. We work with people like David. And we want to find the right people who get it and who, like I say in my post tonight, you know, I'm done with crap kit that doesn't suit me.
I think on that note, we'll leave it there. And again, if you want to like and love again, you can, because we kind of finished and then we started going again.
Sorry.
And we'll leave it there. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for joining Zoe Meek, Penny Locke, Louise Clark, Sarah Church,
Kerry Flinton.
Kerry Flinton. I'm just trying. I can't read it from here. Jill Day, Teresa Edmonds. I'm sure you were there somewhere.
You can't read it from here. That's okay.
I need my glasses on Wednesday. Thank you so much. I've had an amazing dinner around here as well tonight, just so you know that.
Apparently he's coming around every Monday.
Have a great evening. Take care. Thank you so much, Steph.
Good stuff.
Is that okay?
Yeah. I can talk all night, as you've gathered.
That's 40 minutes. It's good.
Yeah, perfect.
And there's some interesting people on there.
Yeah. Excellent. And there'll be lots that can't watch live that will watch it again. So.
Yeah.
Oh, let me stop mine as well.
Sure.